Do you enjoy open world survival crafting action RPGs? Need a break from your Pokemon with guns and casual slavery game?
I caught a human, forced him to work for me, and then put him inside a zoo.
Well, boy, do I have good news for you then. Enshrouded is the newest entry in the open world survival crafting action RPG, also referred to as
Alscar
genre. But this one caught my attention and really stood out in this very oversaturated market, which is why I wanted to make a review of this game. My hope with this review is that you'll have an idea of what the game is about and help you make an informed decision on if it's worth your valuable time and money. Because, let's face it, there are hundreds of games in this genre and you just never know what you're gonna get. Spoiler alert, it's really fun. So why did Enshrouded stand out to me? What makes it an
Alscar
game that I'm interested in playing over the others? Well, that's because it feels like they took Valheim and Breath of the Wild and threw it into a blender and added their own take on the tried and true elements that made those games so successful and fun. And I'm gonna continue to compare it to these two games. It takes a lot of elements from Valheim, but in a more casual and forgiving way. You have temporary comfort and food-based buffs, but don't need to eat and drink to stay alive. A robust building mode that isn't based on foundation integrity, giving more freedom on how you want to build. A beautiful voxel-based world that you can manipulate and destroy, helping you get to locations you otherwise wouldn't be able to, and similar gear progression. Combine that with Breath of the Wild's handcrafted open world with large spires that you can fast travel to and glide to new locations and points of interest that are littered everywhere on the map, and I think you can see why so many people are comparing it to these games. Enshrouded also has an open and fully customizable skill tree, so you can build your character in any number of combinations to suit your playstyle. If you're still not sold on this, you and your friends can adventure together with online co-op, which is by far the most exciting aspect of this game for me. But I was only given a single game key for reviewing purposes. The realm of Embervale is lost. In their greed for magical power, your ancestors unleashed a pestilence of Shroud that consumed the world. I'm not gonna lie, the story didn't really catch my interest very much, but it sets a nice backdrop of the world that you're playing in. Basically, you're a flameborn that was hidden away in a chamber in a deep slumber, but the flame calls out to you and your time for adventure restoring the world begins. It tells you to build a flame altar, which acts not only as your own custom hub where you can build a base, but also acts as a location on the map for fast traveling, which adds a level of strategy on where to build these limited structures. You're tasked to find the elixir wells where the Shroud roots dwell and are usually heavily guarded. Destroy the root, clear the Shroud, and cleanse the world slowly but surely. After you're given these instructions, you're released into the wild and you have free reign to explore anywhere you want. There are bits of lore shared throughout various journals, notes, and other items you find spread throughout the land, which can also reveal new points of interest on your map. Like I said though, I wasn't sitting at the edge of my seat in anticipation of what happens next in the plot, but it kept me interested enough while playing. Honestly, for me, the gameplay is the meat and taters of what makes me like Enshrouded so much. Unlike Valheim, the world of Enshrouded is not procedurally generated, which has its pros and cons, but it is full of overgrown buildings, towns, and ruins that have enemies to fight, materials to be harvested, and loot to be found. Outside of traveling by foot, you unlock a grappling hook and a glider very early on that helps with exploring. There's also a skill you can unlock early on to double jump, and I got this immediately because it lets you get to hard to reach places so much more easily. I also managed to unlock the Skyrim horse physics in some areas. When I couldn't hop, Skyrim physics, or glide my way up a mountain, I would stubbornly dig my own crude holes into the earth to get access to areas I would otherwise not be able to get to thanks to the voxel world. Speaking of which, the world is pretty massive. I mean, the map is huge.
That's quite big. Impressive.
But after traveling north a ways, I did encounter the dreaded early access barrier that prevented me from continuing in that direction. But as I continued to travel east in a completely different area, I realized that even in its initial early access release, there's still a ton of the world for me to explore and uncover. Gathering basic materials is quick and easy. They took a move from Elden Ring's playbook, and for many of the plants and items you can scrounge and forge from the ground can be instantly collected without stopping and doing an animation every time. Thank goodness for that, because there are lots of items to gather to begin crafting better items and gear to prepare yourself to go into the Shroud. The combat in this game is better than other games I've played in this genre, but let's be real, it's no Elden Ring or Dark Souls, but I would say that it's above what my expectations are for
Alscars.
You can have your sword and board one-handed weapons, slower and more powerful two-handed melee weapons, bows for ranged attacks, wands for basic magical ranged attacks, and finally staffs for casting spells. The lock-on system worked just fine, and while you can sneak up on enemies to be stealthy, my playstyle is more focused around a warrior that took out what enemies I could find from afar and then beat the rest of them down. You have a stamina wheel like Breath of the Wild, and I found that spam rolling will use up your energy fast and leave you vulnerable, so you need to use it sparingly. Timing your blocks correctly, you can temporarily stun enemies, leaving them vulnerable for a few attacks. I unlocked a jump attack and learned that for a lot of the enemies, you can just spam and take out groups without issue. At least most of the time. Hack. Hack. Dying is quite forgiving too. You only drop some of the items in your backpack, but keep all the gear on you, which I much prefer. I didn't use magic other than the wands because spells are ammo based. You only have a limited amount of spells you can find, and while you can most likely craft your own spells later on, I wasn't interested in that. Magic dumb. Me unga bunga smash. But there are ways to unlock permanent spells. I just wasn't able to get any so far. Pair the combat with the skill tree that you can mix and match from any branch to your liking, and you'll see there's a lot of variety on how you can tweak the way your character plays. It's also really cheap to reset your skills and encourages experimentation or temporarily changing your style for a specific challenge. The Shroud presents an additional layer of challenge as you only have limited time in the Shroud before you're poisoned by it and die. But you can reset this timer by exiting the Shroud temporarily or finding items that reset your counter. You'll find different enemies and resources in the Enshrouded areas, and more importantly, the Shroud root. When you find elixir wells, you can delve into them and find a Shroud root nestled deep in the underground, which is usually heavily guarded with a lot of enemies or by a boss. Defeat them, destroy the Shroud root, and receive additional skill points to empower your character, and Shroud cores which can empower your flame altar. Which brings me to another huge aspect of this game. Like I mentioned earlier, once you place your flame altar, you're able to place buildings and crafting stations in that location. It's a protected area that starts off with a 40 by 40 grid where you can build, but you can power up your altar, which provides many benefits like increasing your build radius, longer times you can survive in the Shroud, and allows you to enter higher level Shroud locations. Don't go into the red Shroud.
Oh no!
It's not a good idea. You find out very early in the game that there are others hidden in a slumber and cinder vessels that need to be awakened to help you on your adventures, and you're tasked to release them and bring them back to your base. These NPCs are incredibly helpful as they provide you with quests that unlock new crafting stations and the ability to craft better items and gear. But before they can be much assistance, they need a place of dwelling for shelter. This is where the building comes into play, but I've never been great at the creative building side of things. But with all that being said, I was able to quickly and easily harvest enough resources to put together a small foundation and make my own humble abode. The building felt intuitive enough and has presets for walls that can have openings for windows or doors, or you can go down to a very granular level if you enjoy fine details in crafting, and I bet there will be lots of amazing community-made structures in the future. But for me, that humble abode would suffice. The NPCs give you quests to find and free the remaining NPCs, and each of them specialize in different aspects of the crafting elements in the game. Playing through it already, I highly recommend focusing on these quests as completing them unlocks new crafting stations that let you unlock better gear. Once you unlock a new crafting station, you need to farm a specific type of item that's used in many new recipes until you unlock a new crafting station and need to farm a new, different resource for even better gear. The progression definitely felt similar to Valheim in this aspect. I was eventually led to a keep deep in the Shroud that felt like a light Stormvale-like dungeon and was presented with a cool and challenging boss battle, which felt great to defeat after a few attempts, and concluded my adventure when I discovered an entirely new biome to the east that had much stronger enemies and tons more to explore, even in the current state of the early access build. Now, with all this being said, I do feel like I have to nitpick a little too. I think some people might be turned off by the fact that you can only build in your allotted flame altar areas instead of being able to free build anything anywhere. And I also noticed when you manipulate the world by digging holes outside of your build area, it resets once you leave. So it's not as freely customizable as a game like Valheim. I also found that it was pretty easy to cheese the enemy AI in combat, which was good for me because I had to use everything to my advantage against a group of enemies or get overwhelmed quickly. I also found that the controls were sometimes a little wonky. I would randomly use my glider instead of my double jump, and your character rolls when landing with the glider. It would either disorient me in the heat of combat, or even roll me off a cliff to my death a few times. It was something that I was fighting against somewhat regularly while playing. I also found that sometimes you would need a specific ingredient for important crafting recipes, but have no idea where to find them. Sometimes you get a quest pointing you in the right direction, and sometimes you just have to randomly explore and hope to get lucky. I would love to see some kind of ability or feature that lets you pick a specific item you want to track or forge, and have assistance when being able to locate more of that item. Outside of that, I think Enshrouded is pretty great. It has a few early access quirks to it, but overall, it feels very polished already. it's fun to play, and this is only playing by myself, which I'd still recommend even for a single player experience, but let's face it, taking on a game like this with the boys will make the game exponentially more fun, and I can't wait to experience it with them. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it to be a helpful review. I'll be rebuilding Society and Enshrouded with my friends soon, so if you want to check out what the multiplayer's like, be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more. I want to thank my patrons who are generously supporting the channel. I really appreciate you all. Thanks for watching, and until next time, have a good one.